The Arizona desert turned predator after sunset. Master Chief Cole Bennett pressed his body against frozen sandstone, feeling January cold seep through tactical gear designed for tropical warfare. His breath came in controlled bursts, each exhalation a potential signature in thermal scopes that could be tracking his position. Behind him, 7 SEAL operators formed a staggered column along the canyon wall, each man separated by precise intervals that balanced mutual support against concentrated casualties. The border crossing operation had gone wrong 3 miles back. Intelligence reported this canyon route clear, a neglected smuggling corridor abandoned after Border Patrol installed sensors along the primary approaches. The sensors were there, Bennett confirmed through his night vision optics, but someone had disabled them. Recently, professionally, the cut wires showed tool marks consistent with military-grade equipment, not the improvised methods used by cartel scouts. Bennett's radio earpiece carried the shallow breathing of his team and nothing else. Radio discipline held absolute in hostile territory. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, maintained Overwatch from a position 80 meters back, his 417 Hong Kong dollars rifle covering their rear approach. Ahead, the canyon narrowed into a bottleneck called Devil's Gate, a natural choke point where vertical walls rose 40 meters on both sides. They needed to cross that bottleneck. The medical convoy carrying trauma supplies to the forward operating base sat 3 kilometers north, following a parallel route through open terrain. 22 people, including 4 civilian doctors, relying on Bennett's team to confirm this approach route remained secure. His instincts screamed warning. 23 years in naval special warfare taught Bennett to trust the primitive part of his brain that processed threats faster than conscious thought. Something felt wrong about this canyon. The silence carried weight, like the pause before an ambush is sprung. He raised his fist, signaling halt. 7 operators froze instantly, becoming motionless shadows against dark stone. Bennett activated his thermal scope, scanning the canyon walls above Devil's Gate. Nothing. He switched to night vision, looking for the green signature of electronics or the subtle movement of fabric. Still nothing. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each second. He was about to signal continue movement when the world exploded. Muzzle flashes erupted from concealed positions on both canyon walls, a coordinated ambush executed with military precision. Bennett's team reacted with trained efficiency, returning fire while seeking cover, but the kill zone had been perfectly prepared. Overlapping fields of fire covered every protected position. His radio came alive with terse reports. Contact left, contact right, RPG signature, multiple hostiles, technical vehicle approaching from rear. They were trapped. Bennett processed the tactical situation in seconds. 15 to 20 hostiles in elevated positions. Heavy weapons including at least 2 machine guns, prepared fighting positions indicating hours of setup time. This wasn't a random encounter. Someone knew they were coming. Someone had prepared this specific location as a killing ground. His team returned disciplined fire, but ammunition wouldn't solve this problem. The enemy held superior position and numerical advantage. Bennett's mind raced through options, each one ending in casualties his team couldn't afford. Call for air support, 12 minutes minimum response time. Attempt breakthrough, suicide against machine gun positions. Hold position, get pinned down and destroyed. Then a single shot cracked across the canyon, different from the chaotic noise of the ambush. The sound carried a distinctive bark, the signature of a precision rifle firing at extreme range. On the North Canyon wall, a muzzle flash disappeared. Permanently, the machine gun that had been pouring fire into Bennett's position went silent. Bennett's combat experience catalog ran through possibilities. Friendly sniper? None assigned to this operation. Random engagement? Impossible at this range and accuracy. His mind rejected the obvious answer even as the evidence mounted. Another shot, another enemy position eliminated. Then a third. Each shot came from a different location, someone moving between firing positions with tactical discipline. The ambush faltered. Insurgents who moments before held overwhelming advantage now faced an invisible threat picking them off with surgical precision. Bennett recognized the shift in momentum and acted instantly. He signaled his team into a controlled advance, using the confusion to push toward better defensive terrain. 6 more shots followed in rapid succession, each one eliminating a specific threat. Machine gunners, RPG operators, the technical vehicle's driver. Whoever was providing Overwatch possessed not just exceptional marksmanship, but tactical awareness of exactly which targets would collapse the enemy's coordinated assault. Within 3 minutes, the ambush disintegrated. Surviving insurgents broke contact, retreating into the desert darkness with the chaos of a defeated force. Bennett's team secured the immediate area, checking for wounded and establishing a defensive perimeter, but his attention fixed on the question consuming his thoughts. Who fired those shots? The range alone defied standard engagement parameters. Bennett estimated the shooter's position somewhere beyond 2,000 meters, potentially further. In darkness, through desert thermals that created unpredictable wind patterns, hitting moving targets in combat conditions. The level of skill required existed in only a handful of military snipers worldwide, and none were supposed to be operating in this area. Lieutenant Webb appeared beside him, breathing controlled but elevated. Master Chief, we need to move. That technical's friends might return with reinforcements. Bennett nodded but didn't move. His eyes tracked back along the bullet trajectories, calculating angles and positions. The shots came from elevated terrain northeast of their position, a ridgeline dominated by an old border watchtower. The structure had been condemned 5 years ago, officially abandoned and scheduled for demolition. Sir, Webb pressed. Your orders? Bennett made a decision that defied tactical doctrine. Take the team north. Link up with the medical convoy. I'm checking that tower. Webb's expression showed the objection he wouldn't voice. Splitting forces in hostile territory violated fundamental principles, but Master Chiefs didn't reach that rank without learning when rules served you and when they didn't. Someone just saved 8 American lives using skills that suggested military training. Bennett needed to know who and why. Give me 20 minutes, Bennett said. If I'm not back, continue mission. He moved before Webb could argue, crossing the canyon floor with practiced efficiency. His body protested the exertion after the firefight's adrenaline dump, but decades of physical conditioning overrode fatigue. The tower stood 1,000 meters distant across broken terrain, and he covered the approach in 12 minutes, using every piece of available cover. Up close, the watchtower looked worse than condemned. Rust consumed the metal framework. Concrete walls showed stress fractures. Warning signs in English and Spanish declared the structure unstable, but someone had climbed it recently. Boot prints in the dust, disturbed only by hours, not days. A discarded protein bar wrapper, military issue. And ascending the external ladder, Bennett found fresh scrape marks where equipment had rubbed against corroded metal. He climbed slowly, testing each rung before committing his weight. At 40 meters, the ladder terminated at an observation platform that swayed slightly in the desert wind. Bennett pulled himself onto the concrete deck and froze. A figure occupied the prone firing position, utterly motionless behind a precision rifle. Even expecting a sniper, Bennett's trained eye barely registered the shape against the broken background. The shooter wore desert camouflage that blended perfectly with the concrete and dust. No movement, no sound, a ghost occupying real space. Bennett's hand instinctively moved toward his sidearm, then stopped. Something about the figure's stillness suggested not threat, but exhaustion. He could see now the shooter wasn't aiming, wasn't watching through the scope, just lying there with the absolute immobility of someone who had pushed beyond their physical limits. Identify yourself, Bennett said, voice carrying authority developed through 2 decades of command. The figure didn't move for 3 seconds. Then slowly, carefully, hands moved away from the rifle in a gesture of non-aggression. The shooter rolled onto their side, and Bennett's world tilted sideways. The face behind the dust-covered chamois belonged to Sergeant Aller Voss. Bennett's mind struggled to process the impossibility. Voss had disappeared 11 weeks ago during a routine patrol along the California border sector. Search teams spent 3 weeks combing the desert. They found her vehicle, abandoned and stripped. Blood evidence suggesting violence. Her kit missing. Official status: missing, presumed Kia. Memorial service held. Casualty notification sent to her family in Oregon. But here she sat, alive, staring at him with eyes that had seen things Bennett couldn't imagine. Sergeant Voss, he managed, his voice carrying shock he rarely allowed himself to show. You're supposed to be dead. I needed to be, she said. Her voice came out raspy, dehydrated, but steady. For this to work. Bennett's tactical mind caught up with his emotional response. The pieces clicked together rapidly now. Voss hadn't been killed. She'd gone dark intentionally. The question became why, and what operation justified letting your own command believe you were dead. He moved closer, assessing her condition with a medic's practiced eye. She was lean, too lean, having lost perhaps 20 pounds from an already small frame. Her face showed the weathering of extended exposure. Hands wrapped in improvised bandages. Equipment worn and jury-rigged. She looked like someone who had been living in the field for months without resupply or support. Explain, Bennett said. Now. Voss shifted position, wincing as movement revealed injuries she'd been suppressing. I found something during that patrol. A meeting between cartel scouts and men speaking Arabic. 3 months ago, that might have been routine. Different criminal enterprises cooperating. But these men weren't criminals. They moved like operators. Professional. Disciplined. And they were discussing targets. She reached slowly into her vest, producing a battered notebook protected in a waterproof case. Bennett took it, flipping through pages filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and what looked like organizational charts. I followed them, Voss continued. Realized they were planning something big. Coordinated. Multiple target locations. They mentioned civilian casualties in the hundreds. I couldn't report it through normal channels without compromising the intelligence. So I made a choice. Bennett understood before she finished. Voss had gone undercover. Alone. Without authorization or support. She'd faked her own death to infiltrate an enemy network, gathering intelligence while letting her own command believe she was gone. It was either the bravest or most reckless thing Bennett had encountered in 23 years. How long have you been embedded? He asked. 79 days. The precision of her answer spoke volumes. Someone counting every day of isolation, every moment separated from support and safety. I became Maria Sanchez, a displaced person with sniper skills offering services. They accepted me after I proved my worth. Gave me access to their planning. Their networks. Their timeline. Bennett processed the implications. 11 weeks living among hostile forces, maintaining a false identity, gathering intelligence while one mistake meant torture and execution. The psychological strain alone would break most operators. The ambush tonight, Voss said. They were testing their coordination. Practice for the main operation. When I realized your team was walking into it, I had to break cover. Operation Red Horizon, Bennett said, reading from the notebook's header. What is it? Simultaneous attacks on 3 locations, Voss explained, her voice gaining strength as she shifted into briefing mode. A medical convoy, a border station processing asylum applications, and a civilian evacuation center 40 miles north. Coordinated timing. They're calling it Red Horizon because they plan to execute it at sunrise, when all 3 locations have maximum personnel presence. 800 potential casualties. Mostly civilians. Women. Children. The numbers hit Bennett like physical blows. 800 lives. The medical convoy his team was escorting represented just one piece of a much larger attack. When Bennett demanded. Tomorrow, Voss said. Sunrise. They moved up the timeline after tonight. The ambush failure will make them accelerate before we can respond. Bennett's radio crackled. Webb's voice. Master Chief, convoy is secure. Requesting your status. Bennett keyed his radio. Status green. Prepare for emergency mission briefing. We have actionable intelligence on imminent attack. He released the transmit button and looked at Voss. Can you move? I've been moving for 11 weeks. She pushed herself to sitting position, movements controlled but clearly painful. I can finish this. You need medical attention. Food. Water. Rest. I need to stop Red Horizon. Her eyes met his without flinching. Those people don't know their targets. The families at that evacuation center? They've already survived violence in their home countries. They came here believing they'd be safe. And tomorrow at sunrise, insurgents are going to turn that center into a massacre. Bennett made his second decision that violated standard operating procedure. Can you climb down? Yes. Then we move. You'll brief the team en route. We have 8 hours to prevent a massacre. The descent took longer than the climb. Voss's condition showed clearly now that she was moving. Dehydration, exhaustion, and what looked like poorly healed injuries from weeks in the field. But she never asked for help, never slowed except when absolutely necessary. Bennett recognized the mindset. She'd been alone so long that accepting assistance felt foreign, dangerous even. At ground level, Bennett offered his canteen. Voss drank carefully, controlled, rationing water like someone trained to operate in scarcity. He radioed ahead to Webb, ordering the team to establish a tactical operations base at the convoy's location. They needed space to plan, and the medical vehicles offered both communication equipment and maps of the local area. The kilometer walk to the convoy position revealed more about Voss's condition. She moved with efficiency, but without the fluid athleticism Bennett remembered from her training evaluations. Injuries had accumulated, each one minor, but collectively degrading her physical capability. A limp favoring her left leg. Careful breathing suggesting bruised or cracked ribs. The slight hesitation before using her right hand. How bad are you hurt? Bennett asked. Nothing that stops me from shooting. It wasn't an answer, but Bennett let it stand. They'd deal with medical issues after stopping an attack that threatened 800 lives. The medical convoy had established a defensive perimeter in a depression that offered protection from observation. For armored transport vehicles, 2 supply trucks, and 22 personnel who looked relieved to see Bennett return. Webb had the team deployed in overlapping security positions, professional and efficient. Bennett gathered his 7 operators and the convoy's head doctor, Captain Sarah Chun, around a portable map table. Voss stood slightly apart, still operating on the mental habits of isolation. Bennett gestured her forward. Sergeant Voss has intelligence on an imminent terrorist attack. Listen carefully. For the next 30 minutes, Voss delivered the most comprehensive enemy briefing Bennett had heard outside a Joint Special Operations Command planning cell. She detailed the insurgent network structure, leadership, capabilities, and specific attack plan. Her information included target locations with coordinates, estimated enemy force composition, weapons inventory, and timeline down to 15-minute increments. She'd mapped an entire terrorist operation from the inside. The key target is Ramon Velasco, call sign the Wraith, Voss explained, pointing to a satellite image she'd marked with observations. Venezuelan national. Former military intelligence. He's coordinating all 3 attacks from this compound 23 kilometers northwest. If we eliminate him, the operation collapses. His subordinates lack the training to execute coordination across multiple simultaneous strikes. Webb studied the compound's layout. That's a hardened position. 15 security personnel minimum. We're 8 operators with a medical convoy to protect. Even with element of surprise, we can't assault that location and guarantee success. We don't assault it, Voss said. I eliminate the Wraith. You prevent the subordinate teams from executing their attacks once they realize command is compromised. Eliminate from where? Bennett asked, though he already knew the answer. Voss traced a line on the map to a ridgeline overlooking the compound. 3,000 meters. Clear line of sight. I've ranged it twice during reconnaissance. It's possible. The group fell silent. 3,000 meters represented the extreme edge of precision rifle capability. Under perfect conditions, with top-tier equipment, exceptional skill, and luck, a handful of military snipers might attempt such a shot. But Voss was proposing it after 11 weeks living rough, with injuries and fatigue degrading her physical capability, using equipment that had been maintained in field conditions for nearly 3 months. That's beyond theoretical, Webb said carefully. The longest confirmed combat kill shot is 2,800 meters. You're talking about going 200 meters beyond that. In operational conditions. Against a time-critical target. I know, Voss said. I've spent 11 weeks preparing for this shot. I know the terrain, the wind patterns, the target's routine. It's possible. Bennett examined her face, looking for the signs of someone whose judgment had been compromised by extended isolation and stress. He saw determination instead, not recklessness, not bravado. The calm certainty of someone who had calculated every variable and accepted the responsibility of an impossible task. What do you need? He asked. Voss's expression showed surprise, then something that might have been gratitude. 6 hours to reach the firing position. Weather data for wind calculations. And someone to eliminate the Wraith's backup. Backup? Bennett asked. The Wraith never travels alone. He has a personal security chief, former Spetsnaz operator named Yuri Koslov. If I shoot the Wraith, Koslov will immediately take command and attempt to salvage the operation. He's competent enough to succeed. So you need 2 impossible shots. Separated by 8 seconds, Voss confirmed. The Wraith first, then Koslov before he can reach cover. Both at 3,000 meters. Both first-round hits. The operational requirement hung in the air. Webb's expression showed what everyone was thinking. The plan required perfection from someone who had been presumed dead for 11 weeks and looked like she'd been through a meat grinder. But Bennett had seen Voss's shooting during the canyon ambush. 8 shots, 8 hits, at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, in darkness, under combat stress. She possessed the skill. The question became whether she possessed the physical and mental endurance to execute when everything depended on it. Captain Chen stepped forward. I can provide medical support. For fluids for dehydration. Antibiotics for any infections. Pain management. Give me 2 hours with her, and I can improve her operational capability by 30%. Voss shook her head. We don't have 2 hours. The insurgents will begin moving personnel into position by 0300. If I'm not established in my firing position before then, they'll detect my approach. Bennett checked his watch. 2,200 hours. 5 hours until the enemy began final preparations. 7 hours until sunrise and coordinated attacks. The timeline was brutally tight, leaving no margin for delays or complications. Compromise, he said. Captain Chun treats you en route. We use one of the medical vehicles to transport you closer to your firing position, cutting your approach time. You accept medical intervention that doesn't delay movement. Voss hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with accepting help, then nodded. Agreed. Bennett turned to his team. Webb, you're taking 4 operators north to the evacuation center. That's the highest casualty target. Establish defensive positions and prepare to repel attack when their command structure collapses. I'm taking 3 operators to the border station. When the Wraith goes down, his teams will either abort or execute without coordination. We contain them. And the medical convoy? Chen asked. Returns to base. This location is too exposed. Head back now. Fast and quiet. The team moved into action with the efficiency of professionals who trained for rapid mission adaptation. Within 10 minutes, they had redistributed equipment, loaded Voss into a transport vehicle with Captain Chun, and prepared for deployment. Bennett took a moment alone with Voss before departure. "Tell me the truth. Can you make these shots?" She looked at him with eyes that had seen 11 weeks of things she'd never fully describe. "I don't know, but I'm the only person in position to try. Those 800 people don't know they're about to die. Someone has to stand between them and that sunrise. Voss, if you miss, then you'll have to stop the attacks through direct action. More casualties. Messier outcome. But I won't miss." Bennett wanted to believe her. Wanted to trust that skill and determination could overcome the impossible variables of wind, distance, timing, and human limitation. But he'd spent too many years in combat to believe in certainty. "There's something you need to understand," he said. "When you disappeared, we looked for you. 3 weeks. Every available resource. We found blood. Evidence of violence. We thought you were dead. Your family thought you were dead." Voss's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind her eyes. "I know. I couldn't risk contact. If the insurgents suspected I was still connected to American forces, they would have killed me and disappeared. The intelligence would have died with me. Your mother got the casualty notification. Your father. Your sister. I know," she repeated, and this time Bennett heard the weight in those 2 words. Voss had made a calculation. Trade her family's grief against 800 potential casualties. Choose duty over personal connection. Become a ghost so the living could survive. It was the kind of choice that created heroes or broke people entirely. "After this is over," Bennett said, "you're getting proper medical care. Psychological evaluation. Time to recover. After this is over, I want to go home." It was the first personal statement Voss had made. A glimpse of the human being behind the operator's facade. "I want to tell my mother I'm alive. I want to sleep in a bed that doesn't require security rotation. I want to be someone other than Maria Sanchez." "You'll get that," Bennett promised. "But first, we stop Red Horizon." The medical vehicle carrying Voss departed north, Captain Chun already beginning for fluid treatment in the moving vehicle. Bennett watched the taillights disappear into desert darkness, then turned to his remaining operators. "Gentlemen, we have 7 hours to prevent the worst terrorist attack on American soil since 9/11. The plan depends on a sniper who's been living in hell for 11 weeks, making 2 impossible shots at 3,000 meters. Questions?" "Just one," said Petty Officer Marcus Stone, the team's heavy weapons specialist. "What happens if she misses?" "Then we earn our pay the hard way." Bennett checked his rifle, ensuring the weapon was loaded and ready. "Mount up. We have a border station to defend." The 40-minute drive to the border station gave Bennett time to process everything that had happened in the last 3 hours. He'd started the evening escorting a medical convoy through what should have been routine territory. Now he was racing to stop a coordinated terrorist attack based on intelligence gathered by a soldier who had sacrificed everything, including her own identity, to gather information that could save hundreds of lives. The border station appeared ahead, a cluster of prefabricated buildings surrounded by fencing and security lighting. Approximately 60 people worked night shifts processing asylum applications. Families mostly. People who had traveled thousands of miles seeking safety, unaware that sunrise would bring violence instead of hope. Bennett's vehicle pulled through the security gate. A Border Patrol supervisor named Rodriguez met them, confusion evident. "Master Chief, we weren't expecting military presence." "Emergency situation," Bennett said. "We have credible intelligence of an imminent attack on this facility. I need to speak with your senior officer and see your defensive capabilities." Rodriguez's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "Attack? What kind of attack?" "The kind that kills everyone here if we don't prepare properly. Take me to your commander. Now." The next hour was a controlled chaos of preparation. Bennett briefed the station commander on the threat while his 3 operators conducted a rapid security assessment. The border station had been designed for processing, not combat defense. chain link fencing that would slow but not stop determined attackers, buildings with large windows that created exposure and vulnerability, limited defensive positions, and virtually no hardening against heavy weapons. "We need to evacuate," the commander said after hearing the briefing. "Get these people to safer locations." "No time," Bennett countered. Moving 60 civilians through desert darkness would create a convoy vulnerable to ambush. "We defend here. Turn this station into a fortress as best we can before sunrise." His 3 operators went to work with the urgency of men who understood they had limited time to prepare for overwhelming assault. Petty Officer Stone positioned himself with the team's M240 machine gun, covering the primary approach route. Chief Warrant Officer Davis, their communications specialist, established a network linking all defensive positions while simultaneously monitoring enemy radio frequencies. Lieutenant Junior Grade Thompson, youngest of the group at 24, worked with Border Patrol personnel to create improvised barricades and identify defensive firing positions. Bennett coordinated everything, transforming a soft civilian facility into something resembling a defensible position. They moved civilians into the most protected building, a concrete structure originally designed as a holding facility. Not ideal, but better than leaving families exposed in prefabricated offices with walls that wouldn't stop rifle rounds. At 0230 hours, his radio crackled with Webb's voice from the evacuation center 40 miles north. "Master Chief, defensive positions established. We've got good fields of fire, but limited ammunition for sustained engagement. If they hit us with numbers, we'll run dry." "Conserve ammunition," Bennett replied. "Voss eliminates their command structure. Their attack should falter. You're containing chaos, not defeating an army." "Roger that. We're ready." Bennett switched frequencies to the channel designated for Voss. "Ghost, this is Sierra 1. Radio check." Silence. Then Voss's voice, barely above whisper. "Sierra 1, Ghost. I'm in position. Establishing firing solution." The code name had been Webb's suggestion. If Voss was supposed to be dead, if she'd spent 11 weeks as a ghost, then that call sign fit perfectly. "How's your condition?" Bennett asked. Captain Chin's treatment helped. "I'm operational." A pause. "Master Chief, there's something you should know. If I don't survive this, the notebook I gave you contains everything. Names, locations, financial networks, connections to other cells. Make sure it reaches proper intelligence channels." "You'll deliver it yourself," Bennett said. "After you make the shot." "After I make the shot," Voss agreed, though her tone suggested she wasn't certain there would be an after. Bennett checked his watch. 0300. The insurgents would be moving now, positioning teams for coordinated sunrise attacks. Everything depended on Voss's ability to do something no sniper in history had accomplished under these specific conditions. Eliminate 2 targets at 3,000 meters with consecutive shots, disrupting an attack before it could begin. He'd planned operations on every continent, worked with elite operators from a dozen nations, faced combat situations that tested every aspect of his training. But he'd never felt stakes this high resting on a single person's shoulders. Rodriguez approached, looking decades older than when the night began. "Master Chief, the families are asking what's happening. What should I tell them?" "Tell them we have credible intelligence of a possible threat. Tell them we're taking precautions. Don't mention the specifics." Bennett made his voice calm, authoritative, the tone that helped civilians feel safer even when situation remained dangerous. "Keep them together. Keep them calm. In a few hours, this will be over." One way or another, Bennett thought, but didn't say. The next 2 hours felt simultaneously endless and desperately short. Bennett coordinated final preparations while monitoring 3 radio channels. His team, Webb's element at the evacuation center, and Voss at her firing position. The night carried sounds that might have been desert wind or might have been enemy movement. His operators reported possible contacts twice, but nothing concrete materialized. At 0500, with 90 minutes until sunrise, Davis intercepted radio traffic in Arabic. Master Chief, I'm picking up enemy communications. Multiple teams confirming positions. They're using the exact attack timeline Voss described. This is real. Bennett keyed his radio to Voss's frequency. Ghost, Sierra 1. Enemy forces are positioning for attack. What's your status? Establishing final firing solution, Voss replied. Her voice carried absolute calm, the flat effect of someone entering the mental state required for extreme-range precision shooting. Wind is variable. I'm compensating. Target has just emerged from the compound building. I have visual confirmation on the Wraith. Bennett's pulse elevated despite decades of experience managing combat stress. Everything came down to this moment. What's the range? 2,973 meters. Voss paused, and Bennett heard the slight sound of breathing exercises, the technique snipers use to control heart rate before critical shots. Atmospherics are challenging, but manageable. Temperature gradient creating thermal layers. I'm accounting for it. 3,000 meters. Nearly 2 miles. The bullet would travel for multiple seconds, during which wind, temperature, humidity, and a dozen other variables could push the round off target by feet or even meters. The human element alone, Voss's ability to control breathing, heartbeat, muscle tension, and mental focus, represented variables that could mean the difference between a perfect shot and complete miss. The Wraith is stationary, Voss continued, her voice taking on the distant quality of someone whose consciousness had narrowed to scope, target, and calculations. Kozlov is 30 meters distant. After first shot, I estimate 8-second window before he reaches cover. Can you make both shots in 8 seconds? I have to. Bennett wanted to say something encouraging, something that acknowledged the impossible nature of what he was asking her to do. But operators at this level didn't need encouragement. They needed trust and space to work. You're cleared hot, Bennett said. Execute when ready. The radio went silent. Bennett imagined Voss on that distant ridgeline, prone behind her rifle. I pressed the scope. Breathing slowed to the point where each exhalation became a measured event. She would be calculating windage, elevation, the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, the slight difference in trajectory caused by shooting downhill. Then the human factors, her own heartbeat, the tension in her muscles, the way exhaustion and injury might affect her ability to hold perfect stillness. Somewhere in that calculation, Voss would find the moment, the space between heartbeats where her body achieved absolute stability. That fraction of a second when all variables aligned and possibility became reality. She would pull the trigger in that space. And 2 miles away, the bullet would begin its journey. Part 6. Bennett counted seconds in his head. At 3,000 meters, the bullet would take approximately 4 seconds to reach target, depending on altitude and atmospheric conditions. For seconds during which the Wraith might move. For seconds when wind could shift. For seconds where everything could go catastrophically wrong. 7 seconds passed. Then 8. 9. Voss's voice came through the radio, still calm, but with an underlying current of intensity. First target down. Transitioning to second target. Bennett exhaled breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The Wraith was dead. The insurgent network's central coordinator eliminated. But Kozlov still lived, and if he reached cover and seized command, the attacks would proceed. 3 more seconds of silence. Second target engaging, Voss said. Another pause. Impact. Bennett keyed his radio. Confirm status. Both targets neutralized. Kozlov is down. Now Bennett heard something new in Voss's voice. Not triumph, not relief, but a kind of hollow exhaustion. The Wraith's security team is in chaos. They're abandoning the compound. Master Chief, I just decapitated their entire command structure. Outstanding work, Ghost. Maintain position and provide Overwatch. Davis interrupted on the command channel. Master Chief, enemy radio traffic is going crazy. They're reporting leadership down, hearing confusion and panic in their communications. This was the critical moment. The insurgent teams positioned at 3 target locations now faced the reality that their coordinated attack had lost coordination. Some would abort. Some would attempt to execute their individual missions without central command. Bennett needed to ensure that any who chose violence would fail. He switched to Webb's frequency. Sierra 2, leadership is neutralized. Expect your enemy element to either withdraw or attack without coordination. Stand ready. Roger. We're tracking movement approaching our position. Estimate 6 hostiles. They're advancing but showing poor tactical discipline. That made sense. With the Wraith dead and Koslov eliminated, the subordinate team leaders were making decisions without the training or experience to execute professional operations. They would fall back on basic skills, which made them predictable and vulnerable. Bennett's own situation remained quiet. The team assigned to attack the border station had apparently chosen withdrawal over unsupported assault. Smart choice. They'd been preparing to attack a soft target with heavy weapons and numerical superiority. Now, with their command structure destroyed and facing unknown American military presence, retreat became the logical option. But Webb's team was about to face contact. Bennett monitored the radio as Webb directed his operators through the engagement. Professional voices calling out positions, confirming targets, coordinating fields of fire. The contact lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, Webb reported 6 hostiles neutralized, 0 friendly casualties, and the evacuation center secure. The 3rd target location, the medical convoy's original route, reported no enemy contact. That team had apparently scattered or withdrawn entirely once they realized the operation had collapsed. In 15 minutes, Voss's 2 shots had prevented a massacre. All stations, Sierra 1, Bennett transmitted. Threat is neutralized. Mission success. Begin security sweeps and evidence collection. Ghost, you're cleared to exfiltrate your position. Sierra 1, Ghost. Voss's voice carried a tremor now, the adrenaline beginning to crash after hours of sustained operational stress. Exfiltration will take 2 hours. I need a few minutes. Bennett understood. Voss had been operating on will and necessity for 11 weeks. Now that the mission was complete, her body and mind would demand payment for everything she'd deferred. The exhaustion, the pain, the psychological weight of maintaining false identity while surrounded by enemies. Take your time, Sergeant. You've earned it. We'll coordinate pickup. Dawn broke 40 minutes later, painting the Arizona desert in shades of gold and red. The sunrise that should have brought coordinated violence instead revealed a border station full of families who didn't know how close they'd come to dying. Bennett watched them begin to move around the facility, returning to normal morning routines, and felt the familiar mixture of satisfaction and isolation that came with successful covert operations. These people would never know. The families at the evacuation center 40 miles north would never know. 800 potential casualties who would wake up tomorrow and the day after, living lives that continued only because Sergeant Aller Voss had spent 11 weeks in hell gathering intelligence and then made 2 impossible shots when everything depended on it. Rodriguez approached, holding coffee that smelled like salvation. Master Chief, I don't know what you did, but thank you. We've been monitoring border patrol channels. No attacks reported anywhere. Sometimes the best operations are the ones where nothing happens, Bennett said, accepting the coffee. You'll want to document everything about tonight. Report it through proper channels. There will be intelligence personnel who need to debrief your people. Already started. Rodriguez paused. Can you tell me what really happened? Off the record, Bennett considered the question. The official story would be classified for years, maybe decades. The public would never hear about Operation Red Horizon or how close it came to success. Voss's sacrifice would remain known only to a handful of people who understood the true cost of intelligence work. Off the record, Bennett said, someone saw evil coming and stood in its way. That's all that matters. He spent the next hour coordinating cleanup and evidence collection. His operators moved through the area like skilled archaeologists, cataloging enemy positions, communications equipment, and weapons. Every piece of intelligence would help map the broader network that had planned Red Horizon. At 0800 hours, Bennett drove north to extract Voss. She provided coordinates for a pickup location near her firing position, a flat area suitable for helicopter landing. But Bennett wanted to see where she'd taken those shots, wanted to understand the physical reality of what she'd accomplished. The ridgeline overlooked the compound where the Wraith had died. Even with spotting scope, Bennett could barely make out details at 3,000 meters. The distance turned buildings into toy models and human beings into barely visible specks. Voss had shot across that distance twice, hitting moving targets, under operational stress, after 11 weeks of physical and psychological degradation. He found her packing equipment with methodical care, moving slowly but deliberately. Captain Chun had remained with her, monitoring her condition and providing continued medical support. The doctor looked up as Bennett approached. "She needs a hospital," Chun said bluntly. "Dehydration, malnutrition, infected wounds on her feet, probably cracked ribs, and psychological trauma I'm not qualified to assess. She should have collapsed hours ago." "But she didn't," Bennett said, stating the obvious. "No," Chun agreed. "She didn't." Voss finished securing her equipment and turned to face Bennett. In full daylight, he could see the extent of what 11 weeks had cost. She looked gaunt, almost fragile, bearing only superficial resemblance to the solid operator he remembered from training evaluations. But her eyes remained clear, focused, present. "It's over?" she asked. "It's over. All 3 target locations secure. 0 civilian casualties. We're still coordinating with intelligence agencies to roll up the broader network, but the immediate threat is eliminated." Voss nodded once, then sat down heavily on a rock outcropping. The motion revealed how much effort she'd been investing in simply remaining upright. "Good. That's good." Bennett sat beside her, giving her space but remaining close. "Tell me about those shots." 3,000 meters. 2 targets. Consecutive hits. That's not just skill, Voss. That's something else. She was quiet for a long moment, staring across the desert toward the compound where the Wraith's body still lay. "I've been planning those shots for 6 weeks. Every day, I'd come to this ridgeline during reconnaissance. I'd range the compound, calculate wind patterns, study the Wraith's routine. I knew exactly when he emerged from the main building, knew where he stood to smoke his morning cigarette, knew where Koslov positioned himself during security protocols. You lived 11 weeks for 2 shots, Bennett said, understanding now. Everything else was preparation for those specific moments. Yes, the intelligence, the infiltration, earning their trust. All of it was about creating the conditions where I could take those shots when the time came. Voss pulled her legs up, wrapping her arms around her knees in a posture that looked young and vulnerable. Master Chief, I need to tell you something. About those shots. Go ahead. I wasn't certain I could make them. 3,000 meters is beyond anything I'd done before. Beyond what training prepares you for. I calculated every variable, ran the math 100 times, practiced the fundamentals until I could execute them unconscious. But I wasn't certain. Bennett let her talk, sensing she needed to process what she'd done. When I looked through that scope this morning, when I saw the Wraith standing there exactly where I knew he'd be, I had a moment of pure terror. Because I realized that if I missed, 800 people would die. And it would be my fault for trying something impossible instead of calling in a conventional response. But you didn't miss. I didn't miss, Voss confirmed. But not because I'm special or exceptional. I didn't miss because I'd practiced those specific shots so many times that my body knew how to execute even when my mind was terrified. Muscle memory, fundamentals, repetition. That's what made the impossible possible. Bennett recognized what she was doing. Voss wasn't celebrating her accomplishment. She was processing the weight of what had depended on her. acknowledging the magnitude of responsibility she'd carried for 11 weeks. This was the conversation that happened after impossible missions. The moment when operators confronted what they'd done and what it meant. "Sergeant, do you understand what you accomplished today? I prevented a massacre. You did more than that. You identified a threat, developed intelligence single-handedly, maintained cover for 11 weeks in hostile environment, and then executed the most difficult shots in modern sniper history. You did all of this alone, without support, without relief, without anyone to share the burden." Voss looked at him then, and Bennett saw tears tracking through dust on her face. "I wasn't alone. I had arts training. Your confidence. The knowledge that people were depending on me. That's not the same as physical presence, but it's not alone either." "Art?" Bennett asked. "My instructor at sniper school, Master Chief Art Collins. He taught me that competence matters more than appearance. That being underestimated is a tactical advantage. That the quietest operators often accomplish the loudest victories." She wiped her face with the back of her hand. "He believed in me when others didn't. That belief carried me through 11 weeks when everything else wanted me to quit." Bennett made a mental note to commend Master Chief Collins personally. "What happens now? What do you want?" Voss considered the question seriously. "I want to go home. See my family. Tell my mother I'm alive. Sleep for about 3 days straight." She paused. "But first, I want to debrief properly. Make sure my intelligence gets to the right people. Ensure this network gets completely dismantled. I didn't spend 11 weeks gathering this information to see it wasted. That's already coordinated. FBI and CIA both want to talk to you. Your notebook is probably being analyzed by a dozen agencies right now." "Good." Voss stood, moving carefully, testing her body's limits. "Master Chief, can I ask you something?" "Anything. When you climbed that watchtower last night and found me there, what did you think?" Bennett considered how to answer honestly. "I thought I was seeing a ghost. Then I thought I was seeing the toughest operator I'd encountered in 23 years. Someone who'd sacrificed everything: identity, comfort, safety, even letting her family believe she was dead, to gather intelligence that could save lives. I thought you represented everything I believe about what it means to be a warrior." Voss absorbed this, then said quietly, "Thank you. For believing I could make those shots. For trusting my intelligence. For not ordering me to stand down." "You earned that trust," Bennett replied. "Every day for 11 weeks." The sound of helicopter rotors interrupted further conversation. A UH-60 Black Hawk appeared from the south, angling toward their position. The cavalry had arrived to bring Voss back to civilization, medical care, and the beginning of recovery from an ordeal that would take months or years to fully process. As they loaded equipment for extraction, Bennett's radio crackled with Webb's voice. "Master Chief, you need to see this. We found something at the compound. A server with encrypted files. Looks like Red Horizon was just the first phase of something much larger." Bennett exchanged glances with Voss. "Define larger." "Multiple operations. Different cells. This network extends beyond what we thought." The intelligence Sergeant Voss gathered? "It's not just about stopping one attack. It's about dismantling an entire infrastructure." Voss's expression showed grim satisfaction. "Then my 11 weeks just became worth even more than I thought." The helicopter touched down, rotor wash kicking up desert dust in swirling clouds. Bennett helped Voss aboard, noting how Captain Chen immediately began another medical assessment. The sergeant settled into the crew's seat, closed her eyes, and for the first time in 11 weeks, allowed herself to truly relax. Bennett strapped in beside her as the helicopter lifted off. Below, the Arizona desert stretched to horizons, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere down there, 3 locations held 800 people who would never know how close they'd come to dying. Would never know that a small, quiet sergeant had spent 11 weeks in hell to keep them safe. The helicopter banked south, heading toward proper medical facilities and the beginning of Voss's long road to recovery. Bennett watched her sleep, genuine sleep, not the vigilant half-consciousness of someone maintaining operational security, and felt a profound respect for what she represented. The military trained people to be warriors, taught them weapons, tactics, physical skills. But it couldn't teach the character that made someone like Voss choose to disappear for 11 weeks, to endure isolation and danger, to make impossible shots when everything depended on it. That came from something deeper, something that separated operators who were merely competent from those who became legends. The flight to Tucson Medical Center took 40 minutes. Bennett spent the time coordinating with multiple agencies who wanted immediate access to Voss. He ran interference, establishing that she would receive medical care first, rest second, and debriefings only after doctors cleared her as stable. Too many agencies treated operators as intelligence assets first and human beings second. Bennett wouldn't allow that with Voss. At the hospital, a team of military doctors took over her care. Bennett watched them work with professional efficiency, starting new IVs, conducting examinations, documenting injuries. The lead physician, a colonel named Morrison, pulled Bennett aside after the initial assessment. "She's in rough shape," Morrison said. "Severe dehydration despite Captain Chen's field treatment. Malnutrition has depleted muscle mass and affected organ function. Multiple infected wounds, 2 cracked ribs, stress fractures in both feet. Probably has intestinal parasites from field water sources. And that's just the physical damage. But she'll recover?" Bennett asked. "Physically? Yes, with time. Psychologically?" Morrison shrugged. "That's beyond my expertise. 11 weeks deep undercover, maintaining false identity, constant threat of exposure and execution, then executing a mission where hundreds of lives depended on her skill. The psychological impact of that experience will take years to fully manifest. She needs serious mental health support." Bennett had expected nothing less. "She'll get it. I'll personally ensure she has access to the best trauma counselors and psychological support available." "Good. Because right now, she's running on fumes and willpower. Once the adrenaline fully crashes and her brain accepts that the mission is over, she's going to hit a wall hard." As if to demonstrate Morrison's point, Voss began showing signs of delayed shock in the examination room. Her hands started trembling. Her breathing became rapid and shallow. The emotional control she'd maintained through 11 weeks and an impossible mission finally cracked under the weight of safety. Bennett moved to her bedside immediately. "Sergeant, look at me. You're safe. The mission is complete. You're in a hospital. You're getting proper care." Voss's eyes found his, wide and unfocused. "I can't. I keep seeing the scope. The targets. I can still feel the trigger. That's normal. Your brain is processing everything you've held back. Let it happen. You're safe. I killed them. The Wraith. Koslov. I shot them from 3,000 meters and watched them die through my scope." Bennett gripped her shoulder firmly, grounding her in physical reality. "You stopped a massacre. Those men were about to murder 800 innocent people. You made the hard choice that saved lives. I know that. But I can still see." She trailed off, breathing hard, fighting for control. Morrison intervened with practiced calm. "Sergeant, I'm going to give you something to help with the anxiety. It's not sedation, just something to take the edge off while your nervous system resets. Is that acceptable?" Voss nodded jerkily. Morrison administered medication through her fore, and within minutes, Bennett saw her breathing slow and her muscles begin to relax. The immediate crisis passed, but he recognized it as just the first of many she'd face in the coming weeks. "Stay with her," Morrison told Bennett. "Familiar faces help during psychological breaks. She trusts you." Bennett pulled a chair beside her bed and settled in for a long watch. Voss drifted in and out of sleep, occasionally murmuring fragments of Spanish, the language she'd been speaking as Maria Sanchez for 11 weeks. Her subconscious was still processing the dual identity, trying to reconcile who she'd been pretending to be with who she actually was. At 1400 hours, A Navy captain arrived requesting immediate access for intelligence debriefing. Bennett met him in the hallway, his body language making clear this wasn't happening. Captain, Sergeant Voss is receiving critical medical care and psychological support. Debriefing will happen when doctors clear her as stable. Master Chief, we have time-sensitive intelligence that needs immediate exploitation. Every hour we delay gives the network time to scatter. And every hour we push her before she's ready increases the risk of permanent psychological damage. You want her intelligence? Then give her time to become stable enough to provide it accurately. Bennett's voice carried the authority of someone who wouldn't be moved. You have her notebook. That's enough to begin operations. Let my operator recover. The captain recognized he wouldn't win this argument and retreated. Bennett returned to Voss's bedside, satisfied he'd bought her at least 24 hours before the bureaucratic pressure became overwhelming. By evening, Voss had stabilized enough to remain conscious for extended periods. Bennett arranged for secure communication so she could contact her family. The call was short, Voss speaking through tears while her mother sobbed on the other end, both of them struggling to articulate the miracle of a daughter returning from the dead. I'm okay, Mom, Voss kept repeating. I'm safe. I'm coming home soon. When the call ended, she looked emotionally exhausted but more centered than before. Thank you for arranging that, Master Chief. I needed to hear her voice. Family matters, Bennett said simply. No matter how tough we are, we need those connections. My mother asked what happened. I told her I couldn't explain yet. She said she didn't care. She was just grateful I was alive. Voss wiped her eyes. I don't know how to explain this to my family. How do I tell them I let them think I was dead for 11 weeks? Carefully, with time, and with professional help from people trained in family reintegration after traumatic deployments. Bennett leaned forward. Voss, you made an impossible choice in impossible circumstances. Your family will understand that eventually. Right now, they're just happy you're alive. Let that be enough. Over the next 3 days, Voss underwent extensive medical treatment and evaluation. Doctors addressed her physical injuries, but the psychological recovery would take much longer. She experienced nightmares, flashbacks, and periods of disassociation where she confused her Maria Sanchez cover identity with her real self. Bennett visited daily, becoming a stable presence through her recovery. They didn't always talk about the mission. Sometimes they just sat together, both understanding that warriors who'd been through impossible experiences needed time to process without constantly articulating trauma. On the 4th day, Voss was stable enough for controlled debriefing sessions. Bennett sat in as her advocate, ensuring intelligence officers respected her boundaries and didn't push too hard. She walked them through 11 weeks of intelligence gathering, providing details that helped agencies roll up not just the Red Horizon network, but connections to cells in 3 other states. The scope of what she discovered shocked even experienced intelligence professionals. One FBI agent told Bennett privately, "What your sergeant accomplished solo would normally require a multi-agent operation running for months with full technical support. She did it alone with nothing but skill and determination." Part 9. A week after the mission, Bennett received orders to return to his unit. He visited Voss before departing, finding her in physical therapy working to rebuild muscle mass and heal her stress fractures. "Master Chief," she greeted him, showing more energy than he'd seen since the watchtower. "They're talking about medical discharge. Say the psychological trauma might be too severe for continued service." "What do you want?" Bennett asked. "I want to keep serving. Want to take what I learned and teach it. Want to ensure other operators know that competence matters more than appearance, that being underestimated is a tactical advantage, that sometimes the impossible mission requires one person willing to do impossible work." Bennett smiled. "Then fight the medical discharge. You've got advocates. Webb is already writing commendations. Captain Chin documented everything. And I'm personally recommending you for the Navy Cross." Voss's eyes widened. "The Navy Cross? Master Chief, I was just doing my job. No, you weren't. Your job was to patrol the border. What you did was identify a massive threat, conduct an unsupported intelligence operation for 11 weeks, then execute the most difficult sniper shots in modern military history to prevent a massacre. That goes beyond duty into extraordinary heroism. I don't feel heroic. I feel tired and scared and uncertain if I'll ever be normal again. That's what makes it heroic, Bennett said. Real courage isn't absence of fear. It's continuing to do the impossible work even when you're terrified. You embodied that for 11 weeks. They sat quietly for a moment, both processing what had happened and what came next. Finally, Voss spoke. When I was on that ridgeline, about to take those shots, I realized something. I'd spent 11 weeks completely alone, making every decision independently, carrying the weight of hundreds of lives without anyone to share the burden. And I thought that's just what operators do. We endure. We sacrifice. We stand alone. But, Bennett prompted, but when you climbed that watchtower and found me, when you trusted my intelligence without hesitation, when you defended my recovery time against agencies that wanted immediate access, I realized I wasn't as alone as I thought. My team was always there, in spirit if not physically. That's what made the impossible possible. Bennett understood. You're part of something larger. Individual operators accomplish incredible things, but we're strongest as a community. Your 11 weeks of isolation were necessary for the mission, but that doesn't mean you have to stay isolated. I'm starting to understand that. Voss smiled, small but genuine. Master Chief Collins taught me technical skills. You taught me something equally important. I don't have to be alone. Bennett stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. When you're recovered, when you're ready to return to duty, my team has an opening for a specialized sniper instructor. If you want it. Voss's expression showed surprise, then deep gratitude. I'd be honored. Good. Take your time healing. We'll be waiting. 3 months later, Bennett received a message that Sergeant Aller Voss had successfully fought her medical discharge and been cleared for return to duty with psychological support conditions. 6 months after that, she arrived at Bennett's unit to begin her new role teaching advanced sniper techniques. She looked different from the gaunt, exhausted ghost he'd found in that watchtower. Healthy weight restored, physical injuries healed, moving with confidence rather than the cautious tension of someone expecting attack. But her eyes still carried the weight of what she'd experienced. Some burdens never fully disappear. Her first day, Bennett's entire team assembled for introduction. Voss stood before them, small in stature but commanding in presence, and delivered a brief introduction. I'm Sergeant Aller Voss. I'm here to teach advanced sniper techniques and field intelligence gathering. I won't share details of classified operations, but I will share everything I learned about making impossible shots when lives depend on it. Some of you will underestimate me because I'm small, quiet, and don't fit the stereotype of elite operators. That's fine. I've learned that being underestimated is a tactical advantage. Your assumptions are not my limitations. The team recognized immediately they were dealing with someone extraordinary. Over the following months, Voss proved to be an exceptional instructor, combining technical expertise with hard-won field experience. She taught not just mechanics of long-range shooting, but the mental discipline required to endure impossible missions. Word spread through the special operations community about the small, quiet sergeant who'd spent 11 weeks deep undercover, then made 2 3,000-meter shots to prevent a massacre. The story grew in the telling, acquiring mythical qualities, but those who served with her knew the truth was even more impressive than the legend. A year after Red Horizon, Bennett and Voss shared coffee in the team room, a morning ritual that had become routine. She'd continued therapy, processing her 11 weeks as Maria Sanchez, learning to integrate that experience rather than being haunted by it. The nightmares had decreased. The flashbacks became manageable. She was healing. I got an email yesterday, Voss said. From FBI. They've dismantled the entire network connected to Red Horizon. 37 arrests across 4 states. 3 international operations disrupted. All because of the intelligence I gathered. How does that feel? Bennett asked. Validating. Like those 11 weeks meant something permanent. But also strange. 37 people arrested because I infiltrated their organization. Some of them I knew personally. Shared meals with them. Learned their stories. That's the complexity of intelligence work, Bennett said. The enemy isn't always evil. Sometimes they're humans who made terrible choices. Understanding that complexity makes you better at this work. Master Chief Collins used to say the best operators are the ones who understand the human cost of what we do. Not just counting enemy casualties, but recognizing each one represents a person with a story. Voss sipped her coffee. I understand that now. The Wraith wasn't just a target. He was a Venezuelan veteran who believed he was fighting against American imperialism. Kozlov wasn't just backup. He was former Spetsnaz trying to earn money for his family after Russia discarded him. I killed them both. That was necessary. But it wasn't simple. Bennett respected her willingness to grapple with moral complexity rather than retreating into simplified narratives of good versus evil. That kind of understanding will make you a better instructor. Your students need to know warfare isn't clean or simple. I hope so. Voss smiled. I'm teaching my first advanced course next month. 12 students, 4-week program. I'm both excited and terrified. You'll be excellent, Bennett assured her. You've lived experiences most instructors can only theorize about. The conversation was interrupted by Lieutenant Webb entering the team room. Master Chief, Sergeant Voss, you both need to see this. Pentagon just released partial information about Operation Red Horizon. They're calling it one of the most significant counterterrorism successes in recent history. He pulled up a news article on his tablet. The story, heavily redacted and sanitized for public consumption, described how military intelligence and special operations forces had prevented a coordinated terrorist attack planned for the Arizona border region. No specific details, no names of operators, just acknowledgement that American forces had disrupted a significant threat. 800 people who'll never know, Voss said quietly. They'll read this article and think, good job, without understanding how close they came. That's how it should be, Bennett replied. We don't do this work for recognition. We do it because it needs doing. I know, but sometimes I wonder what those families would think if they knew. The children at that evacuation center, the asylum seekers at the border station, the medical personnel in the convoy. Would it change how they see the world? Webb considered the question. Maybe. Maybe they'd understand that while they sleep safely, there are people standing watch. People willing to sacrifice everything to keep them safe. People like you. Voss looked uncomfortable with the direct praise. I'm not special. I just did what needed doing. That's exactly what makes you special, Bennett said. The willingness to do impossible work without requiring recognition or thanks. That's the definition of a warrior. Over the following year, Voss's reputation as an instructor grew. Students returned from her courses with not just improved technical skills, but deeper understanding of the psychological and moral dimensions of special operations. She taught that competence mattered more than appearance, that isolation could be a tactical tool, and that the hardest missions often required accepting impossible responsibility. Some students struggled with her teaching style. She was demanding, pushing them beyond comfortable limits, forcing them to confront questions about how far they would go and what they would sacrifice when lives depended on their skills. But those who completed her courses emerged as better operators. Bennett watched her development with quiet pride. The frightened, isolated sergeant he'd found in that watchtower had transformed into a confident instructor who understood that her 11 weeks of hell had value beyond stopping one attack. She was creating the next generation of warriors who would face their own impossible missions. 18 months after Red Horizon, Voss received her Navy Cross in a ceremony attended by senior military leadership. The citation remained classified, but everyone present understood they were honoring extraordinary courage. When the medal was pinned to her uniform, she stood at attention, small in stature but commanding in presence, embodying everything the military valued about individual sacrifice for collective safety. Bennett watched from the audience as Voss shook hands with admirals and generals. He remembered finding her in that watchtower, looking more ghost than human, preparing to take impossible shots. Remembered the journey from that moment to this one, the long road of recovery and reintegration. After the ceremony, as attendees mingled, Bennett found Voss standing alone, looking at her medal with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about Maria Sanchez," Voss said. "The woman I pretended to be for 11 weeks. She doesn't exist, never existed, but she feels real to me. Sometimes I wonder if I left part of myself in that identity. If I'll ever fully integrate who I was, who I pretended to be, and who I'm becoming." "That's a question for your therapist," Bennett said gently. "But I'll tell you what I see. I see an operator who accepted an impossible mission and succeeded, who sacrificed comfort, safety, and identity to gather intelligence that saved hundreds of lives, who made 2 shots that no one should have been able to make, and who took all that experience and chose to pass it forward to the next generation. That's not someone who's lost. That's someone who found purpose through the hardest possible path." Voss absorbed this, then smiled. "Thank you, Master Chief, for everything, for trusting me, for protecting my recovery, for giving me a place in your team. I wouldn't have survived the aftermath without that support." "You earned every bit of it," Bennett replied. "Now you're paying it forward. That's how this works. Warriors taking care of warriors across generations." The conversation was interrupted by a Navy captain approaching. "Sergeant Voss, there's someone here who specifically requested to meet you." Bennett and Voss followed the captain to a quieter corner of the reception hall. Standing there was an older man with the bearing of someone who'd spent decades in military service. He wore a dress uniform with decorations indicating combat in multiple theaters. "Sergeant Voss," the man said, extending his hand. "Master Chief Art Collins, retired. I was your sniper instructor at training school." Voss's face lit up with recognition and emotion. "Master Chief Collins, I didn't know you'd be here. Wouldn't miss it. When I heard what you accomplished, when they told me about those 3,000-meter shots after 11 weeks undercover, I knew you'd taken everything I taught and pushed it beyond anything I'd imagined. You taught me that competence matters more than appearance," Voss said. "That being underestimated is a tactical advantage. That the quietest operators often accomplish the loudest victories. Those lessons carried me through 11 weeks when I wanted to quit." Collins smiled with obvious pride. "You took the fundamentals and applied them in conditions I never experienced. That's not just good instruction. That's exceptional operator instinct. I'm proud to have been part of your development." The 3 of them, Collins, Bennett, and Voss, stood together representing 3 generations of warriors. Collins had taught the fundamentals. Bennett had provided opportunity and trust. Voss had executed the impossible mission. Together, they embodied the military's greatest strength, experienced operators developing the next generation, who would in turn develop those who came after. Later that evening, Bennett found himself alone with Voss in the team room, both of them decompressing from the ceremony's formality. "Can I tell you something?" Voss asked. "Something I've never told anyone?" "Of course. When I was on that ridgeline, about to take those shots, I wasn't sure I wanted to make them." Bennett remained quiet, letting her continue. "Not because I doubted my ability, but because I knew that if I succeeded, if I prevented the attack, I'd have to return to being Aller Voss. I'd spend 11 weeks as Maria Sanchez, living moment to moment, focused entirely on survival and mission. It was terrifying and exhausting and horrible, but it was also simple. Every decision had clear parameters. Stay in character. Gather intelligence. Don't get caught. There was clarity in that simplicity. And returning to yourself was complicated, Bennett said, understanding. Yes, being Aller Voss means processing 11 weeks of trauma. means facing the psychological impact of living a lie, means reintegrating with family and team in normal life. Part of me wanted to stay Maria Sanchez forever because at least that identity had clear purpose without complicated aftermath. But you took the shots anyway. I took the shots anyway, Voss confirmed. Because 800 people mattered more than my comfort. Because duty meant accepting the complicated aftermath. Because warriors don't get to choose easy options. Bennett recognized the profound maturity in that statement. How are you doing with the aftermath now? 18 months later. Better. Therapy helps. Teaching helps. Being part of the team helps. Voss looked directly at him. But I think I'll always be both people. Aller and Maria. The operator and the undercover identity. Learning to accept that duality instead of fighting it. That might make you more effective, Bennett suggested. Understanding different perspectives. Knowing what it's like to be underestimated. Those aren't weaknesses. They're capabilities that most operators never develop. Maybe you're right. Voss stood, stretching muscles that still sometimes ached from old injuries. Master Chief, I have a question. Why did you trust me? That night in the watchtower, when I told you about Red Horizon, why did you believe intelligence gathered by someone who'd been presumed dead for 11 weeks? Bennett considered how to articulate something he'd felt instinctively. Because I saw what it cost you. No one endures 11 weeks undercover for a lie. The price you paid was evidence of truth. Plus, your shots during the canyon ambush demonstrated skill that suggested serious training and capability. I trusted the evidence more than assumptions about what should be possible. Thank you for that trust. It made everything else possible. They stood together in comfortable silence. Two warriors who'd shared an experience that only a handful of people would ever fully understand. The ceremony was over. The medal awarded. The official recognition complete. But the real legacy would be measured in lives saved, students taught, and the quiet continuation of service that defined their profession. Years later, Bennett would retire from active duty and take a teaching position at the Naval Special Warfare Center. He'd cross paths with Voss regularly, watching her develop into one of the military's most respected instructors. She'd eventually write a training manual on extreme-range precision shooting that became required reading for advanced sniper courses. The story of Operation Red Horizon would remain classified for decades, known only to those with appropriate clearances. But within the special operations community, everyone knew about the small, quiet sergeant who'd spent 11 weeks deep undercover, then made impossible shots to prevent a massacre. Students who trained under her would carry forward her lessons. Competence matters more than appearance. Being underestimated is a tactical advantage, and sometimes the impossible mission requires one person willing to do impossible work. 800 people would live their lives never knowing how close they'd come to dying. Children would grow up. Families would build futures, all because one operator chose duty over comfort, sacrifice over safety, and demonstrated that true strength isn't measured by size or volume, but by willingness to stand alone when lives depend on it. On quiet mornings, when the Arizona desert painted itself in colors of sunrise, Voss would sometimes think about those 11 weeks, would remember the weight of isolation, the constant danger, the moment when she looked through her scope and knew that 2 shots would determine hundreds of lives. She'd made those shots, survived the aftermath, found her place among warriors who understood sacrifice. And in doing so, she'd proven what Master Chief Collins taught her years ago. The quietest operators often accomplish the loudest victories. The border watchtower where Bennett found her was demolished 2 years after Operation Red Horizon, finally deemed too dangerous to remain standing. But Voss kept a photograph of it on her desk, a reminder of the night when everything changed, when she stopped being a ghost and became herself again, when she learned that warriors don't have to survive alone, that teams exist to carry each other through impossible experiences. Who fired that shot? Master Chief Bennett had asked when 8 perfect shots eliminated an ambush in darkness. He'd found his answer in a condemned watchtower, a sergeant who'd spent 11 weeks in hell, who'd sacrificed everything including her own identity, who'd made impossible shots when hundreds of lives depended on absolute precision. Sergeant Voss. Operator. Instructor. Warrior. Small in stature. Quiet in demeanor. Extraordinary in capability. A ghost who'd returned from the dead to save 800 lives and teach the next generation that true strength comes not from appearance, but from the willingness to do impossible work when no one else can.